Hi, I'm Zareena. Today we're going to take a look at narrative essay. Okay, so far we have taken a look at factual essays and we have also taken a look at descriptive essay. So what is a narrative essay? Let's take a look at the question, the perfect place for a holiday. Now a lot of you will be confused because you will ask me what is the difference between a descriptive and a narrative. Okay, a descriptive essay and a narrative essay is actually quite similar, so I won't blame you if you're confused. Why is it similar? Because the same question, if I were to change it slightly to describe. Now if I were to add this one word into this question, it changes a narrative essay to a descriptive essay. Okay, and I've already gone through with you what you're supposed to do for a descriptive essay, what the teacher expects from you. In some ways, a narrative essay is a lot easier just because they don't have this word. So the first criteria you should know is, I'm going to take this chalk. Okay, so I'm going to first of all tell you the criteria. Okay, the first criteria you have to understand is they will not have the word, okay, not have the word describe. So if you are ever confused, just ask yourself this, okay? Does this question ask you to describe? It doesn't? Then fine, it's not a descriptive essay. And it makes your life a lot easier because this one is heavily dependent on how good your vocabulary is. If your vocabulary isn't good, you shouldn't do a descriptive essay. It's a little easier for narrative because you don't really have to come up with a story, which means you don't really need a great imagination for this. And another thing is you don't need such an amazing description for you to actually do well for this. Okay, so that is a good point of narrative essays. So first criteria of course is you will not have the word describe, and in fact that's the most important thing. It's definitely not a creative essay because it doesn't, that's the second requirement here, do not need to create a story. Okay, now you can ask me, alright, but I've never exactly been on a holiday, not out of Singapore anyway, so that means I have to come up with a story, so that's creating a story, right? Okay, you can of course use your imagination, your creation or whatever you have read for to write a narrative essay, that's fine. But why is it different from creating a story? A story requires you to have things like, I will get into that in detail later on, but you require to have first of all a story. That means an event, an incident, people. You have to come up with the whole thing yourself. Whereas from both narrative and descriptive, they've helped you out. You don't even need to come up with a story because they are asking you to write about something. Write about the perfect place for a holiday. So no creation necessary. So this is what I mean by you do not need to create a story. Even when you write it, you do not write it like a story. You don't say, one day my mom came and told me, oh, we're going on a holiday today. No. That's another thing which you have to remember when you write a narrative and descriptive. It is not a story in the sense that there will not be any conversations among characters. There will not be a lot of, background structure and all that for the story. So this one you have to keep in mind. You have already gone through the criteria. You don't have the word describe. You do not need to create a story. So keep that in mind. The second point which I'm going to go through now here is what the teacher expects from you. Okay, this part is important. Okay, important because you need to know whether you can write this type of questions or not. So I'm just going to say, put it as maybe marking scheme. Okay. Now, what does the teacher look out for in a marking scheme for this one? Of course, there is your contents. In your contents, they are going to take a look at as to whether you are able to answer the question. Okay, so they are going to look at if you answer the question very well, you will be able to get very high marks. Remember your contents is about up to 25 marks for this. So what do I mean by answer the question? They want the perfect place for a holiday. Make sure whatever you write justifies it. Don't say that, oh, the perfect place for a holiday is Malaysia, and then you don't even describe. No, I mean, you don't even explain why is it a perfect place. You just tell the teacher that I went there, I shot, I had a good dinner and I came back. So why is it a perfect place? You didn't explain. So when I mean answer the question is always refer back. When you read the story, does it make sense? Does it fit with the title? Okay, that's what I mean by answering the question. So for narrative, if you look at it, it's easy. If you can do this, you will actually pass your exam. Okay. The next step you have to think of is, of course, language, which is the same for all the essays, of course. You have to take note particularly of things like grammar, vocabulary, of course. Now, for this, is there anything in particular that the teacher looks out for? Of course, if your vocab is good, alright, you are going to definitely have an edge over other pupils whose vocabulary is not good. So whenever you have a choice of questions, always ask yourself which one will give you the biggest advantage over the other students. Narrative is a lot easier because actually it doesn't require much imagination. It doesn't require to have a huge vocabulary list, but it still helps if your vocabulary is good, because in a narrative essay you're supposed to justify, like for example, the perfect place for a holiday, the best job to be in. All this requires you to more or less explain to the teacher why you feel in a certain way. So vocabulary will help in that sense. So think of this as one of the criteria. First ask yourself, can I answer the question? Then ask yourself, do I have the vocabulary for it? If you have both of this, go ahead and write the essay out. The next thing, of course, will be not to mention spelling and punctuation. This one I've already gone through with you earlier, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but just a quick run through. Grammar, remember, always your sentences, keep it short, not more than 10 words if it's possible. Vocabulary has many descriptive phrases and words as possible. You don't have to use bombastic words. Just remember to describe actions, emotions, the clothes. All this still adds up to your vocabulary. Spelling, simple rule of thumb. If you don't know how to spell that word, it is better for you not to use that word. Try to find another word that can replace this. Then punctuation, like I said, at your level, it's not necessary for you to use things like colons and semicolons. Make it simple. A comma and a full stop will do. And remember, this comes back to grammar again. Don't have multiple commas. It's a common problem with children. Sentence goes on and on. There's no full stop. One comma maximum and one conjunction. What do I mean by conjunction? Words that join sentences. Things like and, because, or. Just keep that in mind and you should be able to get this. Remember, language is 25 marks and I told you there's an invisible 5 marks there, right? In other words, this would be about 25. This should be about 20. And then I told you that there's a 5 marks for organization. I've gone through that, so just keep in mind. That is why structure is very important. If you follow the structure for each of the essays, you should get that 5 marks. So you will automatically get the 5. And you just have to work your way up from there. Alright, so let me just refresh. The perfect place for a holiday, that's a narrative essay. I told you how to identify as long as you don't have the word describe in it, and they also don't require you to come up with a story. So as long as these two criteria are satisfied, that's a narrative essay. Then next one, marking scheme. Just remember that as long as you can answer the question, that means make sure that the story you write fits the title, and you have sufficient vocabulary, not as fantastic as a descriptive essay, but at least a reasonable one. You should be able to choose a narrative essay. Keep in mind also things like grammar, spelling and punctuation when you're writing. You shouldn't have a problem. Okay, after this, I'll actually run through with you the structure of a narrative essay. Okay?